we're going to explore how to write amazing descriptions in your fiction. Descriptions explain the setting, who the characters are, and what kind of world the story takes place in. Descriptions can make or break your story.
Here are 7 key elements to writing amazing description. Let's start with the character's perspective. This is important because the story should take place through the character's eyes. How they see it, how they experience it, how they feel it, it should be from the character's perspective. This makes knowing your character's backstory critically important.
Once you know your character really well, then you can ask this question. What in this scene would stand out the most to my character? And we have an example for you. And in the example, we have a young lady coming home from work, and she comes home to her apartment. She opened the door and fumbled with the packages in her hand. She dropped them on the side table and shrugged off her jacket. The couch was cluttered with laundry she didn't get put away over the weekend. The floor needed to be vacuumed, and the sour smell of dirty dishes drifted all the way to the front door. And in the middle of the room stood a man dressed in a 3-piece suit. The first thing she would have noticed when she walked into her apartment was the strange man standing in her middle of her living room.
I would think so.
I would think so too. I mean, there's a lot of details there that are really not necessary in that moment because it makes no sense. Her sole focus is going to be on that strange man. Now, you may want to have those details because those details give us a little bit more insight into who this woman is and what her character is. But right then, in that moment, that's not what should be focused on.
Yeah, just think about it. If you walked into your apartment or your house and there was somebody standing in the middle of the room that shouldn't be there, I think that's what you would focus on.
Yes. So instead, what you could do is you do this. She opened the door and fumbled with the packages in her hand. She dropped them on the side table and froze. A man dressed in a 3-piece suit stood in the middle of the room staring at her.
So you want to describe things in the order of importance to the character. And I'm thinking that a man standing in the middle of the room is probably the important thing in that scene. All the other stuff can be added later, depending on the whole story. But the order of importance really should be what is critical to that character. And again, knowing the backstory of your character helps you define what is important. If they are somebody that doesn't notice things, maybe they would have fumbled with the packages more. But if they're a very observant person, they would have saw the dude standing in the middle of the living room right away. So to help you with this, we made a 10-minute character sketch, and the link is down below. It will help you get to know your character a little bit better so that you can write description through their eyes. But you can only really do that if you know your character.
The next one is the 5 senses. When your character walks into a room, what does he or she smell, taste, see, hear, feel? What are those senses happening when they walk in the room? And we have an example of this. The aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter from the nearby cafe. She stepped up to the glass counter and fiddled with the strap on her purse with one hand, reaching for the steaming cup of coffee with the other. In this example, we have smell, sight, sound, touch. We have all of these senses happening. The more senses you can engage in your description, the richer and deeper your description will be.
Number 3 is be specific. Being vague in your descriptions really can just be confusing to the reader. So rather than saying something like the tree, say something like the gnarled oak tree with its sprawling branches. It gives the reader more detail to go by. This is where your words really matter. Now, we made a couple of videos about your word choices, and there was a link in the description below. You can check those out. But basically, you want to use really strong verbs and creative nouns to paint a picture in the reader's mind without telling them. You want to show them with those word choices.
Beyond word specificity, is be specific in what details you choose to include, because the reader doesn't need to know everything. You want to include the details that matter to your story, the details that matter to your characters, and let the reader create that visual picture with the details that matter.
So when you start working on this, your first thing is going to be throw in all the details. And you don't have to throw in all of them. You can get overwhelming when you put in too many details. So really be careful about which details that you put in the story.
In our example of the young lady in the apartment, we don't need to know the color of the couch or the color of the walls or what's hanging on the walls. If the details are not important to the story, they don't need to be stated.
Number 4 is all about balance. It's not too much and not too little. If you don't describe enough in your story, then the reader is going to have a hard time imagining the setting and the scene and all of that. So you've got to include enough details.
So an example of this is, take this sentence. A woman sat on the beach drinking water. That's pretty vague and it's kind of boring. It doesn't really tell us much about who this woman is. Why do we care that she's drinking water? That's really all we know.
Now, the opposite is true as well. You can put in so many details that you overwhelm the reader and they completely lose track of the story. So let's give you an example of that. A woman, about 50, with dark hair sprinkled with gray, a small hook nose like a bird, a tattered straw hat atop her tiny head, a long, frayed dress with scuffed patent leather shoes sticking out, lounged in a beach chair on the crowded sandy beach and sipped on a bottle of water. There is so much description about this woman that honestly, I just want to vomit. It's too much. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's good to have a balance in this area.
It is, and some writers really do put that much description about something, and when I read that, I close the book.
So here's an example. This would be a more balanced example of giving a description of this woman. A middle-aged woman with a hooked nose like a bird perched on a chair drinking water. This gives us enough information to visualize this unusual woman without cluttering up the description with all kinds of information.
Now, your style has to come into play here because you may be a little heavy on writing description or you may be a little thin on writing description. That's us. She's way heavy and I just want to get to the point. And so you have to find the balance in that. You can't have too much and you can't have too little. So take an honest look at your style and work towards bringing balance to it.
Next, you want to balance description with action and dialogue. And this is really about the pacing of your story. If you have too much description for too long, it's going to drag and it's going to slow down the story. And so you want to sprinkle description in the midst of your action and your dialogue.
See, the basic rule of thumb here is that description is going to slow the pacing down and action is going to speed it up. Dialogue can do either depending on the situation and how much dialogue or description you put in your dialogue and how much action. So that's the basic rule of thumb. All right, climbing the ladder to number 6, we have what are you emphasizing? See, the more emphasis something needs in the story, the more details it should get. If you put too many details with the wrong thing, you're going to emphasize the wrong thing. So be very careful when you're describing things to really only describe in detail the things that you want to stand out in the story and not become a distraction. So here's an example. In a story, you may have something like, the lady was wearing a red dress. Well, if the red dress is a secret code to her contact that she's supposed to meet, maybe that's important. But if it's not important, just don't mention it. Let the reader imagine. Maybe they think it was a blue dress. That's okay. It's engaging their imagination in the story process.
Number 7 is visualize the scene. Now, sometimes as a writer, we write from our own personal experience. So maybe we've been to a place, so we know what we're writing about. And sometimes it's completely in our imagination. And so, what you want to do is get a visual of what you're trying to describe. And one of the things you can do is you can Google what you're describing and get some pictures, pull up some images, and look at those images of what you're trying to describe.
That's really good. I mean, if you're trying to describe a coffee shop, get a couple of pictures of different coffee shops and describe elements from each one. I know in my book, when I was writing the sci-fi book, there's a spaceship. Well, I went and looked at pictures of spaceships and I ended up drawing one because I wanted to really describe it in a unique way, and that helped me do it.
You can also use a writer's thesaurus, and this is the urban setting thesaurus. These books are great. And you can look up a coffee shop in there, and it's going to tell you what it's going to sound like and smell like. It's going to give you all kinds of words and what it's going to look like, and you can use that to write your description of the coffee house. What is your character going to experience in the coffee house from this? And so you can check that out in the description. We'll put a link so you can check those out.
If you like this video, you should probably watch this one because it's maybe better than this one. Yeah, really, you probably are going to like it. Now, we would love to know what books or authors do you like that do a really good job at the narrative description. Put that in the comments. We would appreciate it. And we will catch you in the next video.